If someone told me a few years ago that one day Marvel was going to make a movie with Tobey Maguire, Andrew Garfield, and Tom Holland all as their own individual Spider-Mans, I'd say that person was crazy. I've been a huge fan of Spider-Man since I was a little kid, and trust me, I'd be the first in line to see that movie, but it just seems like too far-fetched of an idea for Marvel to actually make. Until now. Fast forward to last year and we got Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, which introduced us to the idea that there are multiple Spider-Mans that exist, just each in their own universe. The movie executed the concept in such a grounded way, and recently in the first Doctor Strange movie as well as Spider-Man Far From Home, they talked about the multiverse and how it works so well that the idea of having Tobey Maguire, Andrew Garfield, and Tom Holland all in the same live action movie doesn't seem so far-fetched anymore. With Doctor Strange 2 literally being called the Multiverse of Madness, this would be the perfect opportunity to reintroduce Tobey Maguire to us as the Spider-Man we know and love. And I've scoured the internet far and wide and have actually found some pretty solid evidence that this is already in the works and is coming soon. So that's what we're going to be talking about for the next few minutes. Nothing has been officially announced yet, but unless you're the one person that's living under a rock, you should be able to put two and two together by the end of this video and see that there's something in the works. Just the thought of this alone gets me so excited, I can't wait to see what they're going to do with this. If you're new here, hey, what's up? Nice to meet you. I hope you enjoyed the video and subscribe, so I'll see you here next time. Oh, and Tom Holland did another oopsie in an interview while talking about the live-action Spider-Verse crossover, and we're going to be analyzing that in a second. But I want you to watch until the end of the video. We're also going to be talking about what Tobey Maguire said when he was asked about coming back to the role of Spider-Man, as well as the intricacies of getting Andrew Garfield to come back after what happened between him and Sony after the second movie. But we're going to jump right into it because we've got a lot of juicy stuff to talk about. Now, first things first, the idea of the multiverse being real in the Marvel Cinematic Universe is so cool. This opens so many doors of possibility, and having Doctor Strange 2 be all about the multiverse is going to be incredible. I can't wait to see the Scarlet Witch and Doctor Strange team up. I feel like they're going to be unstoppable unless they're like pitted against each other or something. But I'm sure most of you already know this, Tom Holland has a tendency to accidentally give up spoilers. He is a spoiler machine. I figured by now there's not one person who hasn't been recommended a video by YouTube titled Tom Holland spoiling movies for 7 minutes straight. Now, Marvel is pretty aware of this, and after the first few times it happened, they decided to stick him with Benedict Cumberbatch, Doctor Strange himself, while doing his interviews and press junkets for upcoming movies. So for the last few years, he's been babysat by Doctor Strange during interviews to minimize as many spoilers leaking out as possible, which is great, but there's only one problem. Doctor Strange isn't in Far From Home, which is great for us because that means no one to censor him and we get more news that Marvel doesn't want us to hear yet. Now I want to show you this interview I stumbled across that I found interesting while looking for hints of the crossover. Now pay close attention. The interviewer asked Tom Holland if there's any chance there's a multiverse where Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man, Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man, and himself as Spider-Man all meet together. Now, this is the part where normally Benedict Cumberbatch would take over or give him the look to not spoil anything, and you can see here he looks to where he's normally seated and he's not there. And normally he'd be cut off before he could spoil anything and Cumberbatch would take over as Tom sits there silently. Lucky for him, he paid attention and is doing just as he was taught. He realizes he's getting into spoiler territory and keeps quiet, looking side to side, wishing Cumberbatch was there to take over for him. But at this point, Zendaya and Ned both realize what's going on and he's about to spoil something and he caught himself and they start dying laughing. Now, I noticed something interesting. Rewind a little bit and take a look at what his hands are doing. Right before he gets asked the question, they look like this. He's kind of holding one hand with the other, nothing out of the ordinary. And then as soon as he realizes he's in spoiler territory, he immediately starts playing with his thumbs while his fingers are crossed. Now, if we go back to when he almost spoiled the ending of Infinity War on Jimmy Kimmel, his hands are doing the same thing. He's literally hiding the fact that something like this is already in the works. But let's keep watching. This gets interesting. When he finally collects himself enough to answer the question, he answers a completely different question that was never asked. This is what Benedict Cumberbatch would do with him when they were asked something that was a spoiler. He would just answer by saying how nice it was to work with so-and-so on this movie or something that was completely unrelated to the question. But when the interviewer asked the question, I don't think he intended for it to be a spoiler-packed question. I think he was just asking theoretically, and Tom turned the situation into a minefield for himself. But finally, when he goes back and answers the question, he confirms that he and Marvel or Kevin Feige knows how badly the fans want this to happen and goes on to say that he's down and would love to do it. All that needs to happen is Sony and Marvel would need to figure out how to make it work legally, I would assume. Now, if something wasn't already in the works, he would have just said that he would have theoretically loved to work with them someday, but instead, we got every red flag Tom could give us that this has already been talked about and very well may be in production. And I'm not saying they're getting ready to film tomorrow, but they may be already figured out how to work them into the universe. Doctor Strange 2 would be the perfect film for just a glimpse to show us something's coming. Remember at the end of the first Avengers when we saw our first glimpse of Thanos? We didn't see him in an actual movie until 7 years later when he appeared in Endgame. They could tease Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man somewhere in the multiverse in Doctor Strange 2, which doesn't come out for another 2 years, and then 7 years down the road in Phase 5, we could get a full-fledged live-action Spider-Verse crossover film. That would be so cool, can you even imagine that? This makes me so happy, and I'm glad we have Tom Holland to drop little hints here and there and keep us excited for the future. Now, I'd be a tad bit more skeptical if it was only Tom Holland pointing us towards this theory, but the producer for the last Spider-Man, Amy Pascal, actually said in an interview that there's a lot of versions of Peter, there are a lot of realities, and I think you can expect us to explore them. In this sense, the multiverse is a winning idea because it opens up endless possibilities. We can literally do anything. This is literally confirmation that Sony is on board with exploring the multiverse and all the different variations of Peter, including the Tobey Maguire one and the Andrew Garfield one. But hold on, wait a minute, we just saw Far From Home. What about J Jonah Jameson? The same actor J.K. Simmons is already playing Jameson again. How would that even work? Well, technically, Marvel just got Simmons to come back to play the role of Jameson again. The Jameson in Far From Home is a different Jameson from the Sam Raimi movies. It's just a coincidence that he looks the same in multiple universes. It doesn't mean the Spider-Mans have to. But this actually opens up a door for what could be one of the greatest Spider-Man scenes of all time. Could you imagine if the third Spider-Man movie is a Spider-Verse crossover? All the Spider-Mans meet up, which is incredible on its own, but on top of that, can you imagine if the two J Jonah Jamesons met up too? The one from Far From Home would look bald and just the same as he was in the movie, but for the one from Sam Raimi's Spider-Man, they could get J.K. Simmons to play the role as well, but just give him a wig and CG his face so he looks exactly like he did in the originals. Can you imagine if these two came face to face for a scene? I would cry tears of joy if that happened. Marvel, please make this happen. It turns out that for last year's Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, the co-director revealed they originally considered Tobey Maguire for the role of Peter Parker, but in the end chose to go with Jake Johnson. Why would you not just go with Tobey Maguire? I don't get it. I mean, unless you're saving him for something bigger, like perhaps a full-fledged live-action Spider-Man crossover. I think so. I think they're saving him for something much bigger than a voice cameo. He also went on to say, there were many thoughts about where we could put Tobey Maguire and others, referring to Andrew Garfield of course, but I think after Far From Home those thoughts might have a little more traction. And might I say, yes they do. It makes me so happy to know that all these people high up in Sony and Marvel are all thinking the same thing. Now that the audiences have reacted so well to the multiverse, I think something is actually going to happen here. And recently, Tobey Maguire was asked about reprising his role as a superhero, and he said that he's down to come back. The thing is, he's like 44 years old now, which is crazy because he doesn't look like it at all. But if we don't get the movie for another 7 years, he's going to be pushing 50 and he'll most likely be some sort of mentor to Tom Holland's Spider-Man, similar to the dynamic in the animated Spider-Verse film. The thing with Andrew Garfield is that when he left Sony, or when they let him go, it wasn't on the best of terms. He was supposed to be at a press event where they were going to announce a third movie, but he ended up getting sick and not being able to make it. Sony got pissed off and then just went silent, and the next time he heard from them was when they publicly announced that they're going to reboot the Spider-Man movies with Tom Holland. That kinda sucked. He came to Sony really wanting to tell the story behind the character, and he said that wasn't Sony's first priority with the movies, and that broke his heart because he wanted to put his all into the project. But the thing is, Marvel's been doing such a great job telling Spider-Man's story recently. If Marvel and Sony came to him now on good terms, I think he would do it. If he could see that they were going to put the right things first this time, I think he'd be on board. All three of the other actors have only spoken highly of the others, there's no beef between any of them, and I think they would all love to do it if it's done right. Doctor Strange 2 may be a little early for this, but if anything, it'd be cool to just get a glimpse of a teaser for what's to come. But if this actually happened, can you imagine all the possibilities this opens up? How cool would it be to see Emma Stone come back and make an appearance as Spider-Gwen alongside grown-up Andrew Garfield Spider-Man? Or maybe even see William Dafoe as Norman Osborn again, maybe in Tom Holland's universe though, since he kinda got skewered in Sam Raimi's Spider-Man. But he's the perfect Goblin. I think that'd be awesome. I just think this could be a really good move on Sony and Marvel's part. They just have to figure out how to do it correctly, which could take some time, but they have time. They have the next few years to figure it out before we even hear anything close to Phase 5. But in the meantime, they could still do so much with the multiverse in Doctor Strange 2. Remember what they did with Iron Man in Civil War for the hologram scene where they made him look young? What if they did that with Chris Evans and had him do new lines as Johnny Storm, the Human Torch? I think that'd be hilarious to see him and Captain America pre-Endgame come face to face, and maybe even throw Michael B. Jordan's Human Torch in there too. Things could get really weird really quickly. But that's honestly what I hope happens. The first Doctor Strange movie was so great and so visually appealing. I hope they go full comic book mode for the second one, and they go completely nuts with the special effects. And I can't wait to see the Strange Wanda team up. I think the dynamic will be really interesting, and the powers will get crazy over the top. But I want to know what you guys think of the live-action Spider-Verse crossover. Subscribe if you enjoyed, and go to the comments and tell me what you're thinking right now. I want to know. Thank you as always for the support and listening to what I had to say. As you're watching this right now, I should be on my way back from the Keys. I've got another week before I move, so things are going to get a little hectic, but I'm really going to try to keep the upload schedule consistent. If you want to keep up with me on a more frequent basis, go follow me on Twitter at MichaelJ. But I should be back next week with another video, and I want to see you back. But until then, I will see you in the comments when I get back. Peace.